Earlier today, House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy announced the GOP's commitment to America. Now, this document, which will be unveiled in its entirety tomorrow at an event in Pennsylvania, contains a broad range of policies which are aimed at helping America's families. Now, this will happen if the Republicans are given the majority by voters in November.
The White House and the Democrat majority in Congress control Washington. They're in charge. This is their record. And yet, they want you to give them 2 more years of power. But Republicans have a plan for a new direction, one that'll get our country back on track. It's called the commitment to America.
Well, one of the areas Republicans pledged to address is how the Democrats have weaponized banking to advance their leftist agenda. Now, if you're not sure what that looks like, it was on full display yesterday in a House Financial Services Committee when Michigan Democrat Rashid Tlaib had this exchange with the CEO of J.P. Morgan Chase.
Does your bank have a policy against funding new oil and gas products, Mr. Diamond?
Absolutely not, and that would be the road to hell for America.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Sir, you know what? Everybody that got relief from student loans has a bank account with your bank should probably take out their account and close their account.
Now, before you feel sorry for Jamie Dimon of J.P. Morgan Chase, you know what? They've been doing a pretty good job on their own of pursuing woke policies. In fact, last week at the Pray Vote Stand Summit in Atlanta, Georgia, Ambassador Sam Brownback announced that Chase Bank had canceled his organization, the National Committee for Religious Freedom.
We have money in the bank account, and we were fired by our bank as their customer. Why? What did we do? Well, we won't tell you. The decision was made at corporate level, and then after pushing them for a while, they said, well, if you will disclose who you're going to back and what your criteria are for candidates you're back, then we will consider reestablishing your account. And we said, okay, that's what's happening in America today.
So here's the question. Can and will a new Republican majority put a stop to the weaponization of our financial system? Ohio Congressman Warren Davidson, a member of the House Financial Services Committee and the Select Committee on the Economy, will join me in just a moment. Also, Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin is keeping his promise to empower parents when it comes to the education of their children.
Parents should be the absolute primary advisor, and to shut them out, to close them out of this doesn't make any sense. And that's why we pressed forward with these model policies that put parents in the primary role.
We'll discuss this new policy with the Virginia Secretary of Education, Amy Gadara, later here on Washington Watch. And as we heard earlier this week from President Biden, the pandemic is over. Of course, power-hungry bureaucrats, fearful of losing power over the lives of Americans, were quick to challenge the claim. But for most people, life has been back to normal. So a report published in the American Journal of Preventive Medicine earlier this week is drawing some attention. The report shows that despite the fact that COVID lockdowns and isolations are over, major cases of depression continue to rise. In fact, according to the report, nearly 1 in 5 adolescents report being depressed. Now, this is one of the strongest risk factors for suicide. You know what? Alarm bells should be going off. This report makes clear COVID is not to blame. Global warming is not to blame. There's a deeper, more fundamental issue that has been and continues to be driving anxiety and depression in our country, especially among our youth. Well, we're going to talk about it today with Dr. Jennifer Bowens, Director of the Center for Family Studies here at the Family Research Council. The website is tonyperkins.com. That's a great place to refer people to. They can actually watch the program there, and we have resources on the site for you as well. Today's word is found in Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verse 10. It reads like this: whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might, for there is no work or device or knowledge or wisdom in the grave where you are going. Solomon is basically saying this: whatever God has called you to do your very best. This is connected to the contentment that Solomon says is ours in verse 7 of the same chapter, where he says, go, eat your bread with joy and drink your wine with a merry heart, for God has already accepted your works. You know, as Paul told the Ephesians, do your work as unto the Lord and not men. You see, living and working for the Lord Jesus gives our lives meaning and purpose. That is not just for those called to ministry. When I was a police officer doing my best as unto the Lord, that unlocked the purpose regardless of your occupation, doing it as unto the Lord releases purpose, which brings contentment. To find out more about our Bible reading plan, go to frc.org/Bible. All right, executives from the country's top banks trekked to Capitol Hill this week for hearings on the economy and other industry issues. Some lawmakers, as we just heard, took this as an opportunity to lecture bankers on how to run their business. Now, this highlights a growing trend of how financial institutions are being used as a tool to silence the left's political opponents. The left is pushing financial institutions to adopt a destructive agenda known as environmental social governance, ESG. Join me now to discuss this and more is Congressman Warren Davidson. He serves on the House Financial Services Committee and the House Select Committee on the Economy. He represents Ohio's 8th Congressional District. Congressman Davidson, welcome back to the program.
Good evening, Tony. Thanks for talking with me tonight.
All right, for viewers and listeners who may not be familiar, walk us through what is meant by ESG, a definition of what they're looking for in this.
Yeah, so people hear three letters, ESG, environmental social governance. They're talking about, frankly, almost a religion, climatology as I refer to it, kind of embodied in the Green New Deal or things that push an agenda from the left. And frankly, it's aligned with the Democratic Party. Not all Democrats believe it. Frankly, not all Democrats in Congress even believe it, but they're all voting for it. And it really, you have this alliance between big business and big government. Some people call that historically fascism. The label is irrelevant. What's going on is you have this collusion between big businesses and big government folks, and they're trying to use the power of both to coerce conformity to this set of ideas.
Now, this set of ideas includes things such as abortion rights, gender equity. So this could be possibly the proper use of pronouns. I mean, this thing is somewhat nebulous, and like I said, it could be almost defined by anyone to embrace almost any leftist idea.
Yeah, I mean, kind of the collective ideas, people have started calling it woke or woke. I just say that it does have a heresy code, because when you cross the line, they're ready to retaliate and take action, whether that's debanking you or canceling you in other ways, getting you fired. These are people exercising power, and they will use the exact opposite to say, oh, well, you're threatening them. Well, the people that are getting everyone fired, wouldn't that tell you that they're the ones with the power, and then they're using it? And I just think that when you talk about the financial system in particular, the future of money to me is one of the most important policy debates in Western civilization.
Well, let's talk about that for a moment. I'm going to get into some of the levers that are being used by the left. But, as we just heard this exchange by Rashid Tlaib in the committee with the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, I mean, Chase Bank, as you just heard from Ambassador Brownback, canceled them. So some of this is being pursued by the institutions themselves.
Yeah, for sure. And, that's a nod. Hey, we can support you here, but we can't support you there. Jamie Dimon's very publicly a Democrat, but he's a Democrat that still believes in some form of capitalism. So he might share some of their goals, but at least he's rational in saying, look, this is going to destroy our economy. He said the road to hell is paved with the idea that you're going to cancel energy. I hope he would share that with the idea that you're going to use the financial system as a tool for coercion and control. If you look at all the dystopian futures, they all have this kind of corruption of money, including what you and your viewers would share with me is the book of Revelation is scripture, not just a book. But it's always depicted that way. It's an
right.
Evil action. And so we should resist this because it is evil to kind of corrupt the money and use it as this kind of filter to coerce behavior.
I mean, you see this happening with credit cards. You see this happening with banks canceling people. And you're absolutely right. I mean, how do you, especially as we become more of a electronic monetary system where people are making transactions through cards and other means, it becomes very difficult to engage in business. So in this commitment to America that I know you and your colleagues looked at today, I was up on the Hill earlier in this week, took a look at least the overview of it. What is contained in here that's going to address this issue that is driving a lot of conservatives, out of the marketplace, or at least it's designed to do that?
I'd say there's two components of it that specifically will focus here. One is a government that's accountable. And I think that's where so many people are frustrated. They see different standards applied to them than what's applied to Washington, D.C. People have been so frustrated because it seems that no one's really held to account in Washington, D.C. And frankly, for a long time, the question that a lot of us would get is, when's somebody going to jail? And of course, Democrats wanted to know when Republicans were going to go to jail, or Republicans want to know when Democrats are going to jail. Fundamentally, Congress can't put someone in jail, but whether it's jail or just actions like this, they feel like there's not accountability. So one thing for sure that we can do with a majority is we can hold the government accountable. And we still won't control the executive branch, so we can't prosecute, but we can make it very public. And I think that's going to happen. And then we'll use the levers of power to change some of the behavior with the regulators. So Joe Biden's not going to give this power up voluntarily. We're going to have to take it by force of law. And for that to happen, people have to go vote.
When you look at how government is being used, one of the initiatives by the left is to use the Federal Reserve, the central bank, to impose ESG. I mean, there is a fundamental purpose. I'm not sure that I necessarily agree with it, but the central bank uses their monetary policy to control. Right now, we're seeing this on display. Yesterday, raising interest rates by 0.75% percentage point to try to bring down inflation. But there are some in Congress that want them to do more. Explain that.
Yeah, so if you look at the trend around the world, there's over 100 countries studying something known as a central bank digital currency. And this is something that a particular version, the Chinese version, is what everybody's studying, including our central bank. This is different than, say, Bitcoin, which is a distributed ledger that has permissionless transactions, peer-to-peer transactions like cash. They're looking at a system like China's version that is the creepiest surveillance tool known to man. It's centrally managed, centrally controlled. It's linked to a social credit system. So the central government, in this case, the Federal Reserve, central bankers, would control every transaction. In that sense, they could begin to filter them. And, you could say, well, we're not really doing that. We're just trying to keep us safe from illicit finance. And, it's the same sort of thing that the Patriot Act was initially, just to stop the terrorism. And we all support that. But we saw how the power is a temptation for frail humans. Eventually, somebody is going to abuse it. And you saw those tools abused against Donald Trump's candidacy and then his presidency.
I want to play a clip of Nancy Pelosi earlier today at her weekly press conference, kind of going after Republicans. But I mean, that's not unusual. But I want to point something out after I play clip number 3.
The Republicans just keep revealing themselves. Democrats want women to respect women and women's right to choose and make decisions about family and the rest, and the Republicans that want to criminalize women's health care.
Not true. I mean, if you heard Lindsey Graham yesterday on the program, Democrats want to legalize abortion through all 9 months of pregnancy across all 50 states, and they want you to pay for it. I want to go back to the Federal Reserve, but first, I want to give you a chance to respond to Pelosi's comments today, because a part of the commitment to America covers protecting unborn children and women.
Yeah, we should be clear. Abortion isn't healthcare. It ends a life. It's a tragedy when an abortion happens. And, the real question is, what limitations does Nancy Pelosi support? There are none. I mean, every single Democrat in the House has voted to oppose the Born Alive Survivors Protection Act. That's not even about abortion. This is a baby that's already been delivered, and they don't want to protect that life. They don't want to protect life at conception or anything in between. The only thing that they want is abortion on demand. They won't even say safe, legal, and rare anymore for abortion. They want unlimited, unfiltered, unrestrained abortion. And that's not where the American people are. And so, I think we have to do, what you just said. We worked 50 years together to end Roe v. Wade and to defend life. And if we won't defend this ground, the counterattack, we'll lose it.
Right.
We'll lose it to the counterattack. So we should work together to make sure we hold the ground that we've worked for 50 years to take.
Right. And of course, we can't count on the legacy media. They're giving, like a megaphone. They're serving the Democrats to attack Republicans on this. But the Democrats' position is what's extreme. As you just pointed out, they won't even say, they'll draw the line at birth. All right, you've been critical of Federal Reserve. We were just talking about that and how the left is trying to use them to be a part of the levers of power to silence opposition. But tell us how the Fed is exercising, even now, power outside of its mandate.
Well, one, they've at least Chairman Powell has said that they don't have the authority to launch a central bank digital currency without legislation. So they've studied it. The Boston Fed did a study with MIT, and they've studied the central bank digital currency part of it. So the part they are working on is to use their power as a regulator, not to set monetary policy, but to influence bank policy to push some of these other agenda topics. And so whether that's, essentially your banks have been co-opted to spy on their customers, and that's a condition of being able to operate a bank. And then what do they do with that? Well, the Fed is trying to give them a pipeline of things to be looking for, and frankly, other criteria to either debank someone or to defund them or to raise their cost of capital. And they'll say, well, you have reputation risk. Under the Obama administration, they called it Operation Choke Point. Either way, it's an unjust action by our banking regulators. And there has been some pushback. Some of the Biden administration and nominees were so extreme they couldn't get through confirmation. And I was able to ask, banks about one of those, Saul Amarova, who Sherrod Brown walked around. She was literally pushing for this, in her own view, radical approach that frankly bypassed banks and just had the federal government operate the banking system.
So, Warren, so when you talk about the Fed kind of using this, their power to influence banks, is this a form of the ESG that they're using?
Yeah, if you want to call it ESG, and fundamentally it's their political agenda. ESG, woke, diversity, equity, and inclusion are other words that you'll put in there. And that's the thing with language, they're working to shift, what they're doing, but fundamentally it's all their agenda items. And it's a cooperation between big business and big government. And it was a little refreshing, at least on one of those topics, to see a big bank CEO, the biggest bank CEO, push back and say, yeah, this is crazy. So hopefully that's a sign that kind of like in our communities, not all Democrats believe this. And as I've said, not even all the Democrats in Congress believe it. And so hopefully they'll stop voting for it. So
they're doing this without legislative authority.
Absolutely. And they're picking people that will do it. And that's their fealty test. Are they really on board with the cause? And unfortunately, in a lot of companies, the only way that you get the interview for the C-suite is if you show fealty to the cause. And so I think this is a real corrupting influence. Sometimes they call this stakeholder capitalism.
Right.
And we haven't changed the definition of a fiduciary. Your fiduciary duty, as whether it's a board member or executive in a corporation, is to the shareholders, the owners of the company. You should do what's in the best interest of the company. And whether you're talking the biggest hedge funds or small publicly traded companies, banks, or bank regulators, you're seeing people breach fiduciary trust to pursue political agendas.
Now, we're out of time, so we're not going to be able to pursue this. But the problem with the Fed is that they are self-funded, and they're not getting money from Congress. So without the purse strings, how do you rein them in?
Well, this is one of the bills that I've got, which is the Federal Regulatory Oversight Accountability Act, that would put that portion on appropriations. I think it'd be a really important measure for us to restrain the Fed, and we really should rein them in.
Is that something we'll look at in a new Republican majority?
I certainly hope so. I mean, I'll continue to push it and certainly welcome co-sponsors.
All right. Congressman Warren Davidson, always great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Likewise. Thanks, Tony.